Hey guys, welcome to the All Sports Pass Podcast North. I'm your host, X, and welcome back to another video. But before we get in this video, you already know we got to start off with the verse of the day. And today's verse comes from Proverbs 4:12, and it says, "When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble." Amen to that. And as you can tell on this video, this is another SEC schedule predictions video. And before we get in this video, keep in mind that these are my predictions. These are what I believe will happen over the course of the season. And also, if y'all want to say your predictions, feel free to in the comments down below. I'll do my best to respond to each and every one of you. And without further ado, leave a like and subscribe for more SEC football content, more predictions. And without further ado, let's begin. So for South Carolina, they're coming into the season following a 5-7 season. They went 3-5 in the SEC. And let me go through their losses real quick here. Hold on. So they end up starting the year losing to North Carolina, and this was of course the Duke's Mayo Classic where they lost 31-17. And then the next game they played Furman, who's an FCS team, and they won by a score of 47-21. And then they go to Georgia, and then they lose 24-14. And then they play Mississippi State, and they win 37-30. And then they play Tennessee, and they lose 41-20. Excuse me. And then they play at Florida, and they lose 41-39. And then they play Missouri, and they lose 34-12. And then Texas A&M, they play them, they lose 30-17. And then they play Jacksonville State, and they play Jacksonville State, which was a 38-28 win. Then they play Vanderbilt, which was a 47-6 win. And then they play Kentucky, barely getting by with the 17-14 win. And then they lose to Clemson in the Palmetto this isn't a bowl game, excuse me. The Palmetto Bowl is what they call the rivalry, and they lost by a score of 16-7. So it's going to see what they can do. They've got some departures that I'm going to talk about briefly. Of course, one of them to the draft, Spencer Rattler, is a notable one. And of course, heading into here, I really think South Carolina, they're gonna have some good. Sorry guys, let me wind it back. They're gonna have some good players coming on this team, and of course they get running back Raheem Sanders from Arkansas, and they get Demetrius Knight Jr. who came from Charlotte, and then they get Kyle Kennard who came from Georgia Tech. And they get DeAndre Jules, who's a defensive line from Pittsburgh. It's going to be interesting to see. And, of course, now another preview here is this. Head coach Shane Beamer may join several other SEC head coaches on the proverbial hot seat. Last year they won only 5 games, and the outlook for this year's team is no better. They don't have adequate depth and not sure who will be the starting QB. They do not have Rocket Sanders, who transferred from Arkansas, to help the offense. But the defense was weak last year and must improve. So really, of course, according to this magazine, these are predictions here. Keep in mind that of course, according to this magazine that I'm reading, it's the Football Time Tennessee magazine. It has South Carolina finishing 14th out of 16th, and of course, so it's gonna be interesting what they can do heading into the season. But however, enough of me yapping about some these predictions here. Let's get into my predictions. Let's see what I think is going to happen. So week 1, they're going to be playing Old Dominion, and Old Dominion is a Sun Belt team. And let's see this here. So they lost in the famous Toastery Bowl by a score 38-35 last year to Western Kentucky. And I'm just going to say that I think that, of course, Sun Belt is really not, they're not really a Power 4 conference. Yes, I'm not saying excuse me, Power 5 because rest in peace to the Pac-12. Um, but however, I do think that, of course, that in the Sun Belt, I just think that, of course, it's not really a Power 4 team. So I'm going to have to say this, that I think South Carolina is going to win this one. Then the next game, they're playing Kentucky, and here's what I think for Kentucky. And hold on, let me get it here. I accidentally closed the magazine, guys. I accidentally closed it. So yeah, but however, for Kentucky, let's see here. They got some key returnees. They got wide receiver Barry and Brown back, offensive O-line Eli Cox, tight end Jordan Dingle, the defensive back Maxwell Hairston, inside linebacker De'Eric Jackson, wide receiver Dane Key, kicker Alex Raynor, and the defensive lineman Deion Walker, and offensive linebacker J.J. Weaver. And here's the thing, Kentucky for this preview really, and keep in mind, they also get Brock Vandegrift, who is a Georgia transfer, and they also get linebacker Jamin Dumas Johnson to help lead the defense, as Brock Vandegrift is going to lead the offense as he's quarterback. And for Brock, he didn't really get much playing time at Georgia, but however, I think it's going to be interesting to see what can happen, really. I do think that, of course, heading into this game, I think Kentucky may be more prepared, though, just really for one reason. I just think, of course, that like we saw in the predictions in this magazine, is the fact that South Carolina has a bunch of depth that's still yet to be seen. And, of course, I think that this game, I'm going to say this, I think I'm going to give this one to Kentucky. And also keep in mind, guys, that I haven't watched the Kentucky predictions video in a while. So if I had Kentucky losing this game, which I don't think I did, keep in mind, I can change the pick on a future video. I can do that. But however, I do think that, of course, heading in here is the fact that Kentucky, I think, is going to have their depth more figured out, really. So I'm going to give this one to Kentucky here. Then next game, they're playing LSU. And I have to say, LSU, in my opinion, is really, of course, they don't have their Heisman Trophy winner, Jaden Daniels. However, they do have Garrett Newsomere, who is an excellent passer but cannot run like Daniels. But however, the questions are, can the Tigers shore up their defense, and can the offense with one of the nation's best offensive lines be as good without Daniels? It's going to be interesting to see that. And of course, this game's not being played in Death Valley because LSU is was one of the toughest places to play, and of course it's being played at South Carolina. But I will say this, that I think LSU, honestly, now they did lose. Like I said, they did lose Jaden Daniels. However, I just think that, of course, it's still a bit too early to tell, really, for this. But I'm just going to say this, that I think LSU, according to this, they have a bit more depth than South Carolina figured out. So I'm going to give this one to LSU here. I'm going to give the Tigers this one here. Then next game, they're playing Akron, and I have to say, for Akron, they're in the Mid-American Conference, and this is not a Power 4 conference. But however, they finished 2-10 last season, and of course their 2 wins came against Morgan State, who is a FCS team, and they also beat Kent State, and Kent State is, of course, in the Mid-American Conference as well. So really, I just think that this is a winnable game for South Carolina. I just think so, and I really do believe that heading in here. I just think that for South Carolina, I'm just going to say that I just think South Carolina's going to win this one. There's really not much to say. All right, and then they're off the next game, and then the next week, off the next week, then they play Ole Miss, and I will say this, that I just think that for Ole Miss, that on here it says head coach Lane Kiffin is a proven difference maker. this year he's got his proven quarterback, Jackson Dart, back to lead the offense, and he has several portal additions to boost the defense, of course. And I'm going to say this, that on the defensive side, one of the ones that I've really said was Walter Nolan. And, of course, for Walter Nolan, he actually was at A&M, and he was great at A&M, and I think that, of course, with the fact that he's now at Ole Miss, I think he can help reinforce this D-line, really. But I will say this, that I'm going to say that I just think that, of course, I just think it's going to be a bit of a big test for South Carolina. Now, of course, this game is being played at home, and South Carolina can pull the upset. However, because remember, back in 2022, they upset Tennessee 63-38, and back when Tennessee was ranked number 5, and then they end up playing Clemson the next week and knock off Clemson. And hold on, let me get this here. And for that game, I remember it was at Clemson. So now, of course, South Carolina, I don't really rule them out of really any of these games. However, I do think it is highly unlikely that they will be losing to a team like Ole Miss here. So I'm going to give this one to Ole Miss. Then next game, they're playing Alabama. And, of course, Alabama, it's going to be interesting to see how they've adjusted, of course, under DeBoer, as of course, this is the first time in, like, nearly 2 decades that they've had a new coach, of course, with Saban retiring. And I really think that, of course, it's going to be interesting to see how DeBoer can lead the Crimson Tide, as, of course, he was a Pac-12 coach, and of course, it's going to be interesting to see how he can take what he learned from the Pac-12 to the SEC. Now, of course, the Pac-12 team he coached, though, was the Washington Huskies, who finished runner-up and in the nation to Michigan. And I just think that, of course, it's going to be interesting to see what he can do. And I just think, of course, with SC being a new conference for him, let's see what he can do. But I think on the Alabama video, I think I had Alabama beating South Carolina. So I'm going to keep the pick, and I'm going to give this one to Alabama. But, however, on the predictions here, they do have the Tide's new head coach has some big shoes to fill in replacing the legendary Nick Saban. He inherits an excellent quarterback, Jalen Milroe, and many other talented players start his tenure at Alabama. And, of course, for this, I really think that, of course, let's take a look at Alabama's notable returnees here. And, of course, guys, I will be saying this. Once again, this is from the Football Time in Tennessee magazine. I'll leave a link to the magazine website if you want to see it down in the description down below. But, however, this is who they got back. They got Alabama's got Tyler Booker back. He's an O-line. They get tight end C.J. Dupree back. I don't know how to say it. I don't know. I think it's Dupree. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Then they get quarterback Jalen Milroe. They get tight end Robbie Sorry, I don't know how to say his last name. Then they get offensive line Jaden Roberts. Then they get linebacker Jihad Campbell. And defensive line, they get Tim Keenan III. And they get linebacker Deontay Lawson. Defensive back Malachi Moore. Defensive line Jaheim Oedis. Defensive line Tim Smith. Punter James Burnett. And Neeland Hibbett as well. And, of course, I do think that, of course, for the Crimson Tide, I just think that, of course, they're going to be heading in here, and I think they're going to win. And I just think that it's going to be interesting to see what South Carolina can do. But, however, I just think with this being played at Alabama, and I think Alabama's going to be a bit better, and I just think that it's going to be interesting to see what they can do. So, and also, guys, sorry for Neeland Hibbett. He's a snapper. Sorry, I can't believe I left that out. I am so sorry. But however, for the Crimson Tide, I just think they're going to be able to do it. So I'm going to give this one to Alabama. Then next week they're playing Oklahoma, and this is a newcomer for the SEC. As of when I'm posting this video, it's actually going to be nearly 24 hours. At the uploading of this video, like we only got like 26, 27 hours left before Texas and Oklahoma officially join. So I'm going to be hyped for that. But however, I just think this that for Oklahoma, I'm gonna say this that I'm gonna say that I just think Oklahoma can win this one. They get Jackson Arnold as their key returning running back. Gavin Sawchuk. Sorry, I don't know how to Sawchuk. Sorry. Then they get wide receiver Nick Anderson, wide receiver Andrell Anthony, and they get wide receiver Jalil Farouk, defensive back Billy Bowman, defensive line Ethan Downs, linebacker Danny Strutzman back, defensive back Woody Washington, and defensive back Gentry Williams. So I do think that of course with Oklahoma doing now of course they are heading into the SEC from the Big 12, and I just do think of course that it's going to be interesting to see what they can do. Now of course I do think that of course Oklahoma is going to be a bit of a tough team for some of these teams, and of course South Carolina is no exception. But I'm going to say this: I just think it's going to be. I think it's going to have to be Oklahoma here. I think Oklahoma is going to win this one. Then they're off the next week, and for this next game, it's going to be interesting to see as this next game is Texas A&M, and let me go back here. Texas A&M in these predictions are ranked 9th, and the Aggies are another SEC team with a new head coach, Mike Elko, and he was hired to get the Aggies back in the title contention, but it may not happen this year as he has his injured quarterback, Connor Wingman, returning. But he has his injured quarterback, Connor Wingman, returning, plus his outstanding wide receiver, Moose Muhammad. Since Elko excels as a defensive coach, the Aggie defense should be strong. But I just think that of course for South Carolina, now I do think that of course Texas A&M they're pretty tough. They have pretty tough defense as well, and I do think that of course that they had some pretty good offense as well. But I just think that of course this is going to be a loss for South Carolina. I just see Texas A&M winning this one. Then the next game they're playing Vanderbilt, and I have to say I really think that Vanderbilt is not really going to improve over the course of the season, unfortunately. So really, there's not really much to say about this one. They only won 2 games overall last season, 0 SEC games, and of course they have 2 transfer quarterbacks lead their team. They have Nate Johnson, who transferred from Utah, and Diego Pavia from New Mexico. And I hate to say it, I think I think Vanderbilt's going to be having another rough year, so I'm going to give this one to South Carolina here. Then next game, they're playing Missouri, and I have to say, now Missouri did surprise everyone last year. They won 11 games and went to the Cotton Bowl and defeated Ohio State. And of course, they have Brady Cook back, and they also have their potential All-SEC wide receiver Luther Burden III back. And the defense was strong last year, but they did lose 7 key players, so it's going to be a bit questionable. However, I'm going to say this, that this should be a win for Missouri, so I'm going to give this one to Missouri. I just see it happening. All right, and then the next game, they're playing Wofford, and there's really not much to say about Wofford except for the fact that they are an FCS team. Now, of course, I will mention this, that they're let me wind it back a little bit. FCS upsets aren't uncommon. Now, of course, the most notable one being Appalachian State upsetting number 5 Michigan back in 2007. Now, I do think, of course, that however, an upset here is unlikely. But however, let's take a look at Wofford real quick, and I do think that, of course, for Wofford, I just think that of course after last season, let's see how they did. They went 2-9 and finished 2-6 in the Southern Conference, and I just think that if Wofford can't improve off last season, this honestly, is going to be, it should be a win for South Carolina. So I'm going to give this one to South Carolina, but however, I just think that with Wofford not having a good record last season as well as them being an FCS team, but however the record there, I just don't think Wofford can win here. Then next game, it's the South Carolina's most anticipated games against Clemson, and I do think that of course Clemson is a really good team. They really are, And of course, they've had some mishaps over the past couple seasons. Of course, like I mentioned earlier, 2022 South Carolina team upset Clemson. But however, I just think that, of course, unfortunately, it's not really going to happen this time. I'm going to give this one to Clemson. I just think Clemson's going to be the one to do it. So, yeah, these predictions, in my opinion, they're a little bit tough. However, I do think, of course, it's going to be nice to see because, hey, you never know. It's college football. Anything can happen. And, hey, I can't wait to see how these games turn out. All right, that's all I got for y'all tonight. If y'all like this video, leave a like, subscribe for more college football content. And also, guys, just a little reminder, keep in mind that these are my predictions. These are what I believe will happen over the season. And also, if y'all want to leave your predictions down in the comments down below, feel free to do so. I'll try my best to comment on each and every one of them. All right, so that's it for tonight. Good night, God bless, and peace out.